Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. In this video, I want to look at the chart of Russell Brand, comedian, social critic, political commentator, and he was in some movies too. Guys, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you have not already. Okay, he was born 1 year and 1 day before me. He's an English comedian and actor known for his flamboyant, loquacious style and manner. He's received 3 British Comedy Awards, Best Newcomer, Best Live Stand-Up, an award for Outstanding Contribution to Comedy. So he started his career as a comedian and then became an MTV presenter. He gained a role as a host in Big Brother's Big Mouth. He had his first major film role in St. Trinian's, and the following year he landed a role in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and then Get Him to the Greek alongside Jonah Hill. He also worked as a voice actor in the animated film Despicable Me, Hop, Despicable Me 2, romantic comedy Arthur, and successful stand-up special Messiah Complex. So I'm guessing he has a Messiah complex. Interesting. Special guest edition, British Political Weekly, New Statesman. He's become known as a public activist and campaigner and has spoken a wide range of political and cultural issues, including wealth inequality, addiction, corporate capitalism, climate change, and media bias. In 2014, he launched his political comedy web series, The Trues. He released a book entitled Revolution and worked on a documentary about financial inequality. He's been the subject of controversy, coverage about his promiscuity, drug use, and political views. He was married to Katy Perry. They broke up. He's known for outrageous behavior at award ceremonies. Dismissal from MTV, resignation from BBC, and let's see, he's very controversial and comedic. And biographical documentary called Brand, A Second Coming was released in 2015. All right. His father was a photographer. His parents separated when he was 6 months old. He was raised by his mother. His mother had a lot of health issues, and that shows up in his astrology. She underwent treatment. Brand lived with his relatives. He suffered from bulimia. He left home when he was 16 because of disagreement with his mother's partners. Brand started to use drugs, cannabis, amphetamines, LSD, and ecstasy, and he was sexually abused by a tutor. He had a strange relationship with his father, who took him to visit prostitutes while he was in Thailand when he was a teenager. At 15, he made his theatrical debut in a school production of Bugsy Malone, and began work as a film extra. And then he dropped out of school, or he was expelled for illegal drug use and poor attendance. And he started doing stand-up, and I'm gonna have to, whiz through all this just so it doesn't take too long. Yeah, and he was, I think he started out slow, but then he gained success as a stand-up comedian. Let's see what else. Okay, so he did a lot of stand-up. He did a lot of presenting for MTV and Big Brother, and interesting. He's very he does some interesting stuff. I can't remember Brand was fired several days after coming to work dressed as Osama bin Laden the day after the September 11th, 2001 attacks, and bringing his drug dealer to the MTV studios. That's hilarious, actually. Brand started Rebrand, a documentary. All right. yeah, so that's the sort of thing he does, which I kind of admire. I don't agree with all of his views, but I do appreciate his outrageous gall and rebellious kind of nature, which is really interesting. All right. And he makes a lot of enemies. He's very controversial. He's very, conflictual. Um, he hosted SNL, MTV Movie Awards, a lot of stuff. He has a pretty strong stage presence. He's been an actor in various side roles. The main roles was Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Get Him to the Greek. Let's see. Well, he's done a lot of different stuff, some voice acting, production. He has a production company, radio, podcast, talk show host. He had a YouTube political social commentary show that he got some videos removed, so he had to move it to Rumble. He's done a lot of writing, like articles, books, stuff like that. Written articles for The Guardian on current events and pop culture, including the death of Amy Winehouse and Robin Williams, and he was friends with Amy Winehouse. He wrote a children's book that was apparently terrible, but it got published anyway because he has a name. He's a brand, Russell Brand. He wrote a book. I think he wrote several books, and he had a pretty bad drug habit, heroin addiction, and he overcame it. Did get better there. Condemned Israel's assault on Gaza. Oh, how horrific. I mean, if you knew the truth about that, I'm not saying that Israel's government is saintly, but neither is Gaza's. They elected a terrorist organization that kills its own citizens, literally kills its own citizens as a government. So Gaza really does not represent a saintly, poor, victimized entity either. They train their children to they indoctrinate them to kill Jews, literally. I mean, there's so much documentation about that. And they have Hollywood, where they film fake atrocities supposedly committed by Israel that are just completely made up, just so they can get victimhood in the international eye. So it's all a load of hooey. It's baloney. It's just people at war, and the Muslims have always hated Jews. Even before Israel, they were second-class citizens in the whole Middle East, and they kicked them all out in the creation of Israel. So yeah, certainly the Muslims are no saints about their Jews in Israel. It's getting better, but not in Palestine, not in Gaza. It's ridiculous. So that's a load of hooey. They're not victims. They victimize themselves completely. Let's see. He's very political, very socially aware. The Truth, Revolution, Political Activism. And he's also assaulted. I think he's like when he was with Katy Perry, I can't remember where I read this. He assaulted a paparazzi and got arrested or something. So he's not, he's not like a wallflower. He's pretty aggressive. He does a lot of political commentary, and I don't agree. He's kind of like, he's in between. He started out as like kind of like this socialist, communist leaning type person, which is stupid and it's just ignorant. And it's like, yeah, every single time, like there's zero cases for it. I don't care. Like, just straight up, like, you're dumb if you think that. But he's leaning more towards the freedom because he's seeing how corrupt, especially during this whole COVID blah blah. I'm afraid to say it because they'll, like they're watching, they're listening. The ridiculousness, and he's waking up to how corrupt that whole thing is. It's completely, and I'm not like, they're corrupt on all sides. Both sides of the political spectrum is completely corrupt, but it's not like one side represents some great ideal. No, not at all. And he's waking up to the tyranny and all that, and how they co-opt all those, they co-opt both sides, just to be real about it. It's just one side is more effective in their co-optness. They just can hide behind one side better than the other, if you know what I mean. What else? Yeah, he really started wait, as did most people. Most people started to be like, whoa, what's with all the tyranny here? What's with all the draconian, the fascism, so he started to make some sense about some things. I still don't completely agree with him, but he does make sense about some things. Okay. He was arrested on battery charges, paparazzi. This is what I was talking about. Ejected from GQ awards, based on like, he mentioned the Hugo Boss's former business making uniforms for the Gestapo. Brand said of the Nazis, they did look fucking fantastic, let's face it. And then he goose stepped across the stage in a comical imitation of the Nazi march. That's funny. I mean, that's not offensive. You just got to lighten up. Now he's not being offensive. And then the stuff about the CV, what was it? I don't know, 19. Yeah. Trying to think of a code way of saying that. He's diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar disorder, bulimia, pornography addiction, self-harming. He described the concept of fame as like ashes in his mouth. Sounds nice. Ashes in your mouth. He's spiritual. He was a Buddhist, Hare Krishna. He's into TM, even into Christianity. But so it seems like he's generally trying to connect to spirituality in a broad range, open-minded, which I appreciate. I'm really down on religious fundamentalists. I think they're just, a scourge of society. Whatever religion you belong to, if you're fundamentalist about it and you just think my religion is right and all the other religions are wrong, you're an idiot. Like, you're just straight up an idiot. When you come at it like that and you just think like they're all wrong, I'm right, like that's always a sign of ignorance. He's vegan. Yeah, a lot of substance abuse, and he's had a few different relationships. All right, let's look at his astrology. I know I sound hypocritical when I talk about politics because I'm like, I'm right, you're wrong. And I'm like, if you say that about religion, you're wrong. So, well, whatever. It is the way it is. I think tyranny and concentrating power at the top is pretty much always wrong. So I'm a hypocrite because I think religious fundamentalism is ignorant, but political fundamentalism, fundamentally, I believe in freedom. So if that makes me a political fundamentalist, then so be it. Okay. He's a Gemini, like myself and like a lot of other people. And he's got his Mercury in Gemini, so Sun and Mercury in Gemini, and his house system, his quadrant house system, is way off kilter. You can see here, in both, because the ascendant degree is right at the end, which means Aquarius is mostly taking up his first house, and then the angles are way. I mean, this is essentially the 12th whole sign house, which, if you want to talk about, I mean, it sort of makes sense if you look at, his drug addiction, acting, that whole thing. But anyway, let's look at it. All right, so This technically would be fourth quadrant, but it's I'm gonna say it's mostly fifth house. I'm gonna say it's mostly fifth house because it's trine, because I take Aquarius to be largely what's representing his first house, and he feels very Aquarian to me. So largely Aquarius is dominating his first house. So if you take it from that, the trine will be 12 degrees Aquarius, which is clearly in the first house. So Sun trine the 12-degree Aquarius mark is fifth. The trine is fifth and ninth. Those are the aspects. So it is bringing. So you could say some fourth house, but fifth house, and fifth house is primarily entertainment and arts and creativity and children. He didn't have any children, but that's probably due to South Node in Gemini, right? I think he wanted children. Katy Perry didn't, and so, and yeah. Any case, so I think South Node is preventing his children because South Node creates detachment and spirituality, and yeah, it's in any case, it's not good for the physical development of the house that's in, unless you get it in early on. Like if he had children young, which apparently he didn't, that would have made sense. But as he gets older, it's sort of denying that. And Gemini Sun, for a lot of things, is for any type of communication, speaking, writing. It's very prominent for actors, or I mean, it's not the main thing for actors, but it's definitely well represented, especially in something like the fifth house, especially when Gemini has Mercury in it. So the whole sign of Gemini is strengthened by strong Mercury here. And Mercury is quite slow. I'll show you. It's not super slow, but it's retrograde at 21 degrees. And just to give you an idea, mine's 17, and a really slow Mercury would be like, 7 or below, 7 arc minutes. And this is degrees per day, not minutes per day. Yeah, so it's less than a degree per day. It's 21 minutes per day. So that's very slow, and it's moving retrograde. So it's going to be disagreeable, defiant. Mercury retrogrades are always like, they're, they kind of have an initial, they love to disagree with people. You say one thing, they're not the type to go along. They're the type to be like, if they're being polite, if they're being respectful, if somebody who's like a real authority who they're respectful, they're not going to just be like, oh, I disagree with you. They'll go along with it, but they do have a very strong tendency to want to flip the script, to want to present a different narrative because it's the retrograde. But his is very slow, so it's not like, he's not the most defined. There are those who are very fast retrograde, and they're going to be like probably a little bit rude, not necessarily, it's going to be different for different people, but definitely they have the tendency to negate things, to want to present a different, opinion or verbiage or whatever words. They're going to go against the grain, obviously. But very intellectual, very smart, very clever, very quick-witted. Gemini's that snappy quality. If you watch him just freestyle, and this is similar to what Joan Rivers had. I mean, a lot of people, right? Lauryn Hill. So that's very prominent. That's very strong. Fifth house, entertainment, right? Fifth house, being in the spotlight. Fifth house, fun and games. Fifth house, romance, right? Artistic creativity. It's a good combination. So for acting, for speaking, for writing, and if we just look over at the third house, we can see, well, he's got the sign and the house of the third, the Gemini, right? Well represented. And if you have that doubling over, the sign and the house of the same nature, Gemini is the third sign. Aries is the third house, third cusp is in Aries. Definitely you're going to have the skills of that house, well developed, that sign in that house, well developed, right? And he's got a whole stellium, third house, Aries stellium, with the moon, Mars, Eris, Jupiter, and Chiron. And I left Eris in here because Eris is the troublemaker, the discordia, the strife. It has a relationship too. It does well. It's very strong in Aries, and it's such a slow-moving planet. Like pretty much most people have Eris in Aries. I think it might even still be in Aries. I'm not sure. I have to check on that. It might still be in Aries. But that's why Aries, for most people, even going like way back, Aries is the sign of the troublemaker, right? And it combined with Gemini. Gemini is the trickster. Aries with Eris in it is like, the physical, Gemini will loves to play the intellectual trickster, jokester, pranks, right? Aries being a little bit more physical, right? So then you combine the two, you get a real troublemaker, right? A real jokester. And Aries combined with Gemini can be hilarious because of this tendency. And in my observation, the funniest people have a strong combination of air and fire. Generally speaking, it's Gemini and Aquarius. Libra's not as funny, but it can play a role. But a strong Gemini Aquarius influence along with one of the fire signs. I think any of them will do. Aries, Sag, or Leo, right? Or if two are well represented, even better, right? So that's very strong, and we're getting the third house. So obviously, all things related to communications, acting, media, writing, voiceover, all of it. Behind the camera, in front of the camera, anything with, where he has to communicate and express himself, stand up, comedy, political. Well, we'll get to the political stuff. That's more up there, but so he has a lot of issues, obviously, with all these red lines. You can just immediately tell just by looking at the red lines. He's got a cardinal square, right? A grand cardinal square, which makes him very initiating conflict, because cardinal is initiating, and the square is it's bringing a lot of conflict, a lot of disagreement, a lot of head butting, fist bumping, not in the good way, right? That, and then his Mars is in domicile in Aries, so he's got two really strong planets, Mercury and Mars. And let's go back to this for a second. Sun is not ruling a cusp, but it is dominating the 7th house. So it's bringing the 7th into the 5th, 4th. So romance, partnerships are going to be big for him, right? Because now, and then, entertainment as well as like personal entertainment. It's a good combination, 5th and 7th. They're sextile. It's a lot of fun when they can mix, because you're combining personal relationships with fun and entertainment and romance. So that's a good combination. It's a lot of fun. And then Mercury is ruling the 4th and 5th cusp, 6 whole signs. So there's a bit of conflict there as well. We could say 4th, 5th, and 6th. As well as 8th cusp. That's a bit troublesome, the 8th. But it's in good dignity, nonetheless. Mercury's in Gemini. But it does bring in 8th house influence, which is sexuality. Now, if you're taking, personal relationships, romance, 8th house sexuality, then you're getting into some of why he's so interested in sex and, you know, pornography, and like he did like a radio show where he read pornography and then he was like kicked off. And he's very sexually oriented. Like the guy's oversexed, you know. But you can see that with the 7th and 8th coming into the 5th, fun, romance, entertainment. He's combining all of these things, right? Along with South Node, and South Node in Gemini is going to create somebody who's naturally Gemini and very, you know, it's very intuitive for him to have the whole Gemini persona. And it's 0 degrees, so it's like very strong, right? It's fully he's got the full spectrum of Gemini going on, so he's very, very Geminian. Entertainment, entertaining, interesting, intellectual. Yeah. South Node conjunct the sun can indicate fame, especially early on, but it can also indicate somebody who's just sort of bohemian, right? They're just like, they don't care about convention. They don't care about worldliness. They don't care about fame, fortune. They might have it, but they don't care about it, right? Because they're just not, the sun kind of represents our worldliness, our connection to the outside world, how we show up in the world. And so when South Node and Sun come together, you especially as they get older, it creates somebody who's just like, they don't care about the world. They're going to do their own thing. They're going to go off the beaten track. They can walk, you know, they can just like one day walk into the woods and stay there forever. Just be like, fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, they're just not going to. He was entitled to, like, I don't know how many like half the 40 million that Katy Perry made when they were married together, and he turned it down. He's like, no. And he never spoke badly of her. He's not like this bitter, resentful, petty person. He was very loving towards Katy Perry after they divorced, and he did not want half the fortune. That's South Node conjunct the sun. They just don't care. They don't care about worldliness. And that's a really interesting quality to have. It definitely makes him interesting. His views are going to be interesting because he's not coming from an egotistical, worldly sort of like, give me power, give me success, give me wealth, give me, you know, all this stuff. And so it does give a little bit of credence to sort of like his socialistic attitudes. But you have to realize, I mean, he doesn't have to realize, but he's not coming from an ego play. He's not coming from a sort of, I don't know, the two halves of communism, socialism are the idiots and the ones who understand what it's all for and want power and control, right? That's the two halves of the communistic spectrum. The ones who think they're going to be on top, enslaving everyone else, and the ones who think that it's going to be great for all the people. You know, workers are going to take control of the whatever means of production or whatever nonsense it's delusional, right? And he is delusional. I mean, he's got Neptune opposite the sun. I mean, I have Neptune opposite the sun, so I'm sort of talking about myself, but there's mitigating factors here. Neptune opposite the sun can create, obviously, drug, alcohol issues, addictions, whatnot. And it can create, anytime there's an opposition, it's invoking sort of the Libra archetype. So it's bringing in various relationships that will fulfill this opposition, especially if it's Venus. But even Sun, it's going to attract people who are going to lie, cheat, and steal him. Steal from him. Or you know, people who are into drugs and alcohol, or delusional types, you know, like there's going to be delusional relationships where he's going to get into relationships, he's going to think one thing, it's going to turn out to be another. You can, you know, relate that back to Katy Perry, and yeah, stuff like that. Like people going to, you know, can take advantage of him with this combination, right? But it does create a lot of imagination and potential for delusion. Yeah, and then especially when I was younger, that was much stronger. I have some mitigating factors, but definitely I was prone to delusion a lot when I was younger. All right. What else? But it's also spiritual, Neptune. In its higher expression, Neptune has a very strong spirituality. Okay. Moon conjunct Mars, when Mars is really strong, it's not good because there's potential for abuse. And like the most obvious example of this is Jeffrey Dahmer. Moon conjunct Mars in Aries in the 7th house. Now, Moon often we relate to women, but it doesn't have to be women. Obviously, in the case of Dahmer, it was gay men who were weaker than him, who he could take advantage of. So really, what Moon conjunct Mars, especially for a man, will mean is that he could take advantage of certain people who are in a weaker position than him, that are playing a moon role. This can be women. This can be people who are a little bit more feminine, a little bit more passive, weaker, right? Sort of taking advantage. And it being the 3rd house, it's going to have a more of a verbal quality, an intellectual verbal. So he can be, what I'm trying to get at is he can be verbally aggressive, verbally assaulting even. And if he gets angry, you bet he'll chew you out. But I don't think, there can be a tendency to use the hands because 3rd house is skills of the hands, but it's not, and 3rd house is very courageous house. So it's not like he's above the physicality, getting physical, but I think it's mostly limited to verbal assaults, verbal abuse, verbal aggression, verbal attacks, verbal, troublemaking, discordia, strife, eris. But Jupiter is also here, and Jupiter protects. Jupiter is the great benefic. Jupiter is going to mitigate the negativity. So it's not really strong. It's just sort of like if you piss him off, he'll chew you out, and he'll probably do a pretty good job, right? He'll come right back at you, be quick, witty, smart, and get you where it hurts. But he's not going to be really, really destructive about it. He's not going to be really mean. This Jupiter is going to hold him back, prevent him from causing too much trouble, or from hurting someone too much. Now let's see, Mars is ruling the 6th house, so there's a lot of conflict here, competitiveness, in his intellect, in his words, in his expression. That also relates to the health issues with the mother. 6th house has a detrimental Saturn, which is also the ascendant lord, but I'll get to that more. We know that Mars conjunct Moon in its own is not really good. That's an emotional, because Mars is debilitated in Moon sign of Cancer. So we're getting emotionality and a lack of control. Mars in Cancer can be violent or overly sexual. This is not Mars in Cancer, but it's Mars conjunct Moon, right? But definitely some abusiveness. Definitely we're getting a lot of troublemaking, but generally Mars is strong. There's also an opposition to Pluto between this, and that is difficult. And we can see certainly sex abuse there because Moon also relates to mother and childhood, right? So especially abuse in childhood. It was the tutor, and this is 8th house, but 9th house cusp coming into the 9th house. So it's pulling in some 9th house elements. So, which is interesting. 9th house, teacher, tutor, right? That sort of thing. The opposition, Moon and Mars, opposite to Pluto. Pluto's in Libra, definitely brings in a relational and sexual opposition, because Pluto is deeply desirous, and Libra is relationships, and Mars is male sexuality and aggression, and Moon is female. So there's a lot of sexuality there in this combination, right? Yeah, so a sexually obsessive, and in relationships, having to do with women. Moon is the feminine archetype, as well as Venus in Cancer, which I'll get to, but that's in Moon sign as well. So there's a lot of relationship, women, sexuality issues going on with him, for sure. Mars is pulling in. I mean, it has a strong 10th house influence, but also I would say, yeah, the square to the ascendant is right where this Uranus is, right? Because you can see Uranus is exactly square the ascendant and descendant. So he's very Uranian. That's the height of the sky, that we're exactly where this Uranus is. So definitely there's a strong 10th house influence, even though this is the 9th house cusp. And it's the 11th whole sign house. So you can see how this is very confusing, right? And very mixed. But we could say 10th, primarily a lot of 10th house, but 9th house as well, 9th, 10th, coming into the 3rd. So, you know, religion, but also public image, career, fame, all that is coming into the 3rd house. Jupiter is ruling the MC as well as the 11th house cusp, and as well as the 2nd. So voice and career again, but also the 11th house does deal with the social issues, the political issues, the worldliness. So that also is coming into the 3rd house of media, of words, writing, communication. So he's going to be speaking about all these things. It's very prominent. And even double over, so even more with this North Node and Neptune here, which I'll get to. But there is a trine between, it's a little confusing to see here, but just look at the degrees, Mars and Neptune, right? And even though this is 10th quadrant, it's pulling in 11th and even a touch of 12th house influences. So yeah, public, career, social issues, political, and the Neptune to Mars is going to be pretty harmonious. Neptune and Mars seem like an odd couple, really. One is the male aggression, the other is the you know, the imagination, the subconscious, the spiritual, the mystical, the lies, deceit. But the trine there is quite good for, because it's such a strong trine, 10 and 10 degrees, for being a little bit militant about ideals, right? In a healthy way, in a harmonious way. If it was square, that would sort of be a religious zealot or an idealistic zealot of some kind. Perhaps, like I was saying before, the religious fundamentalist. But no, this is a healthy idealism. And I actually have this trine as well, Mars to Neptune and Sag. My Mars is in Leo, but it creates a mystical, like fighting for higher belief, higher cause. Even though Jupiter rules belief, this is Sagittarius though. And Neptune and Sag can be very idealistic, like spiritually idealistic. So this is sort of like bringing in the physical aggression and force, the masculine quality in service to higher ideals, right? So he's going to be a defender of his Neptunian philosophical idealistic beliefs, especially with the conjunction to North Node and it being in the 10th house, right? So he has that. He's very connected to spirituality, and he's very open-minded about it as well, which is represented by the trine, right? He's not a religious fundamentalist. He's interviewed Eckhart Tolle. He's very fond of the Dalai Lama. He said he's an incarnation of the Buddha, which he's not. Nobody says that. That's just his own screwed up thinking, probably too much drugs. But he's not a reincarnation of the Buddha. Yeah, in any case, so he's got a healthy relationship with mysticism, spirituality, and spiritual ideals. That's the Neptune and Sag, the combination, right? Very Jupiterian quality. And Jupiter as well is, you know, conjuncting his Mars by 7 degrees. So the philosophy, the idealism, the religion, all of that is prominent with him. there's a sextile between Mars and Eris and the sun, and that's quite good because Mars in good relationship to the sun is very healthy because it gives the personality a lot of get up and go energy, right? These are the doers, because Mars is exalted, or sorry, sun is exalted in Aries. So that's a very healthy combination. And the sextile is great. So this helps out his personality a lot, helps out his ability to do things, to initiate things, to not be lazy, to not be indulgent, to get up and go and do stuff, right? Initiating action and being a strong physical energy, a vital force. Let's see here. Jupiter. So his ascendant is ruled by Saturn, whether you take it to be Capricorn or Aquarius. It's Saturn. Uranus does play a role. We'll get to that. Saturn is debilitated, or sorry, detriment. I differentiate. I call opposite domicile in detriment and opposite exaltation debilitated, right? So Saturn is in detriment in Cancer. Saturn is structure, authority, willpower, the structural willpower, right? And it sort of breaks down in Cancer. It's a bit too emotional. Like it's like having a government that's just all like emotionally motivated and just like, crying and like just being all I don't want to say feminine. I want to say overly emotional, because there can be some obviously very powerful feminine forces in politics. I'm not at all a male chauvinist. I love women, and I think they can do everything. So put that in the books. FYI. Any case, yeah, this Saturn does not do well in overly emotional Cancer. It breaks down. It's like a rusty, wet structure that just doesn't function well. So his willpower, his authority, his structure is weak, right? We're not going to want to elect Russell Brand for president, right? I mean, I'm not, and I don't think anyone else is, and I think he knows that. He doesn't have the backbone for it. As entertaining as he can be, as funny or as insightful, he's not the type that's we're gonna want him, as president or as any authoritative leadership role. And that is his ascendant lord. It's in the 6th house too, so he might have some health issues that we don't know about, or up and coming. However, there is a nice connection to, it's a square, but Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And that is good, even though it's a square. And we see that, like, right? If Saturn is representing his body, his self, his personal self, first of all, the conjunction to Venus is good and bad. It makes him more indulgent. The Saturn's not very strong. Venus is what we love, what we enjoy. It's our food, in this case for Russell, it's going to be the heroin and all the drugs and alcohol and the sex and the women. Venus in the 7th house, big flirt, huge flirt, right? However, it does give a well-balanced nature to Saturn, because Saturn is exalted in Libra, Aries, Venus's sign. So that is good in a way. Jupiter is strengthening this Saturn, giving it a lot of wisdom, right? Even though there's a square that's hard work and difficulty, he's going to pull himself out of the gutter, in other words, which he's doing, right? He didn't die from heroin. He didn't ruin his career or his, he's still doing well. He's still a public figure. And that's a square to Jupiter. It took some work, it took some effort, but Jupiter is really helping him out here. Saturn is not doing anything for this 3rd house. In fact, Saturn is making him a bit nasty with his expression, with his communication, because Saturn in Aries coming from Cancer is here it's debilitated, there it's in detriment. So it is bringing that poor dignity, and undignified things are good for comedy, because they go there. They go to the taboo places. They talk about all the sex and the disgustingness and the cursing and the vile, all the gross stuff that that gets them booed and kicked off stage. But this retrospectively is hilarious, right? If you have a sense of humor, it's funny. All the obnoxious, naughty things. Like, he can be obnoxious, he can be naughty for sure, but he's going to pull himself up, right? And he's still going to be involved in competitive debating, comedic rhetoric that is, it's going to have an element of academic quality. There's going to be a serious tone to it as well, because he's pulling in sixth house, and sixth house is about work and critical thinking and competition and academia and health. So he's going to pull up his health and his drug habits and all that. And Saturn is ruling it's also pulling in some 12th house, because it is ruling the 12th house cusp. So it is connecting to the descendant. So it is influencing the 6th and 7th house, so his relationships. Saturn in the 7th is generally good, but being in poor dignity, it's a mixed bag. His relationships, although they're going to be, he's going to be mature about it, but it's still going to have the detrimental quality, right? And the 7th lord being moon, 6th lord and 7th lord, there's going to be issues with relationships. I mean, it's not going to be smooth, it's not going to be easy, but he's going to love women with Venus in the 7th. Very flirtatious. Venus is in Cancer, a very feminine sign, so he's all about women. He's all about those women, relationships with women, sexual relationships with women, loves women obsessively. So see that here. And yeah, Venus is ruling the 9th house cusp, and it's not ruling a cusp here, but we say there's a lot of 4th house energy. So he likes this. Let's see, 4th house, 4th and the 7th. I mean, it's bringing in home in personal relationships. The home is going towards personal relationships, and real estate or politics. Hometown issues, politics, stuff like that are going into personal relationships. In any case, this Venus is square Uranus, and Uranus is square the ascendant and descendant. So that's an issue. And for infidelity, certainly, because he's going to be so spontaneous, and the square is not going to bring out the easy or nice side of Uranus. This is just going to be like, oh, I met a pretty girl at a show, and then I just had sex with her. I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden we were having sex. It's what? I don't know. You could see him doing that, and he's probably done that 100 times, maybe 1,000, who knows. But he's going to be very rebellious. Uranus square the ascendant, and the descendant is going to, especially conjunct it's not conjunct, but it is, it is at the height of the chart. So it's very publicly Uranian, publicly rebellious, publicly socially aware. Uranus rules politics as well, because it's dealing with the social mindedness, and a lot of politicians have a strong Uranus, either south node, north node, ascendant, sun, some combination of that. Trump, Obama, who else? Russell Brand, social commentator, right? Kissinger had south node Uranus, right? So Uranus is very prominent for the socially minded, creates great social awareness. And for him, it's going to be as well a rebellious quality, extremely rebellious, and rebellious with others, rebellious with his relationships. You know, he's going to meet people. He's going to rub them the wrong way. He's going to say the shocking things. He's going to be the, you know, especially because it's in Libra. So personal relationships are going to be, you know, rocky and turbulent in so many ways, right? Chiron is opposite this Uranus and square. So he's definitely going to play this sort of like outcast, rebel, down and out, you know, Chiron being the wounded reject, rejected from society, intentionally rejected, like pushing the buttons that's just gonna, you know, provoking this sort of rebellious outcast quality. And as well as this is a generational aspect. I have it. A lot of people have it. Uranus opposite Chiron. It shows a lot of social awareness for the down and out, right? Because Uranus brings in the social awareness, and Chiron is sort of, you know, the homeless, the prostitutes, the minorities, the poor, all the rejects of society are going to be in you know, called to attention by this where Uranus. So that's why, you know, people born at this time, you know, this is the beginning of punk rock, and a lot of the huge message of punk rock was having to do a lot about the you know, social awareness, politics, and the down and out, the Chiron, the, you know, all the people who are left out of society, right? That is a huge issue for this generation, right? My generation, his generation, we're very, very keenly aware of all that. Right? And you'll see him talking about that a lot. So did I talk about everything? Let's see. Chiron is square Venus. If we just look at that, then his relationships are going to be, you know, have a lot of tension as well. And we can see that several ways, of course. But yeah, there's gonna be issues with drugs and alcohol, wounds, painful wounds, rejection. He's not gonna have an easy time with relationships. Let's put it that way. They're not gonna go that well for him. With North Node in Sag, conjunct Neptune and the MC, he's going to chase his career. He's going to be obsessed with the public image, and his public image is going to have increasingly more and more to do with social issues because it's bringing in 11th house. Technically, you could say this is the 12th whole sign house, but and so acting, creativity, being in the spotlight, being behind camera, creating an illusion, like an alter ego, especially conjunct Neptune, that's all going to be very prominent. But so are social issues, so are political issues, so is, you know, media commentary. You know, being the strong Gemini and third house influence that he is, he's going to be able to talk and talk and talk about all the political stuff, all the social stuff, tying in, you know, a show business, you know, mystical quality, as well as religion and spirituality. You know, that is all going to be in his wheelhouse, all the things that he's going to obsess about, and what he's going to be doing for, you know, pretty much the rest of his life. And yes, and, you know, he has this quality of, you know, being, you know, quite adept at, you know, just speaking, communicating, being funny, and but also at the same time being this kind of bohemian character who's just rejecting the world and being a complete you know, rebellious outcast who doesn't care, and that's kind of admirable. And I think he's going to develop his philosophical, spiritual, mystical views that are, you know, in a social awareness more and more, and come to realize where all the corruption truly lies. I hope so. Anyway, I hope he really, really wakes up and sees everything crystal clear, and you know, understands where the corruption really is, and gets it, and spreads the message instead of some phony baloney, you know, nonsense about socialism and capitalism being evil. You know, the whole thing about capitalism being evil is a ruse. It's what we have is not capitalism, it's cronyism, where we have big corporations teaming up with the government to screw everyone over. And then they're like, see, it's the capital, then they co-opt it. They play the other side and say, the capitalists are doing it to us. They're screwing us over. We need socialism and communism. That's going to solve it. And they're on that side of things too. They're rigging the whole thing. You got to step out and step back and just, wash your hands of everything, right? And look at it freshly, because they're all corrupt. They're all criminals. All these, I just got to say, there's like this, like the Antifas and we have a store on South Street that's called the Wooden Shoe. It's considered itself an anarchist bookstore. They're just Antifa puppet bullshitters. Like, they're just nonsense. They're just, championing, cheerleading the left. It's like the people's party, and all this stuff. It's like communist crap, right? The anarcho-communists. They're just the they're the militant wing of the left, the leftists. And I'm not saying the right is any better. They certainly have it's full of corruption as well. They just hide better on the left nowadays. That's just the way the cards are playing it. They hide better on the left right now. So in any case, guys, that's Russell Brand. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's take a peek at his draconic chart. Pluto in Aquarius in the first house, definitely a Plutonic figure. And by the way, look at all the blue that we see now. Now we really see his talent coming out, because 0 degrees air south node, and the draconic always has the 0 degree air south node. So it's trying. But Pluto in Aquarius, rebellious. Pluto in the ascendant in the first house. You will never control these people. They will self-destruct. They will destruct you. They will destroy. I know, I'm saying it funny. They will destruct everything. Uranus in Aquarius still pretty much in the first house. Again, very rebellious, very socially aware, right? Aquarius as well, ruled by Uranus, ruled by Saturn, co-ruling. So yeah, Aquarius is very socially aware, politically aware. Then we get let's see, a lot of Aries, third house influence with North Node and then Neptune. And that's, just adding to that whole thing. And then again, this Mars-Neptune connection, which is very strong in both. So that's interesting. Then a huge Leo stellium in the 7th, right? And that's excellent for show business, for fame, for notoriety, for being on stage, for creativity, for being seen, for being heard. Sun is not here, but all these other planets are, right? So he, very strong stage presence. And then we get to Sun and Neptune, or Pluto again, pretty much conjunct in Libra, where Sun is debilitated. And so again, we're getting that double dose of, the Sun, where it's, or personality, like here, it's the debilitated or detriment, ascendant Lord, and here the debilitated Sun. So there's definitely some poor dignity qualities, which again make for great comedy and an interesting personality, but it's that bad boy image, the drugs and alcohol, sex, prostitution, doing all the dirty stuff, right? And certainly at home with taboo topics and things of that nature. Mercury is pretty much conjuncting the Uranus and Libra, and that's also quite brilliant. Very, very, the intellect is becoming Uranian, so very, very like ideas and quick, fast, brilliant originality, original thinking, genius type. I'm not saying he's a genius, but it is leaning towards that kind of thinking, that kind of mind, when Uranus and Mercury come together. Saturn and Venus and Scorpio, and there again, the sexuality, the Pluto, the drugs, the alcohol, the intensity. Venus is not so good in Scorpio. It's very obsessive. It's obvious. It's in detriment. It's okay. I mean, it does have some dignity as triplicity Lord of water, daytime triplicity Lord of Water signs, but very, very obsessive and sexual and intense in Scorpio, and painful relationships. Okay, so that's pretty much it for Russell Brand, guys. I'm gonna end it here, and if you liked it, which I hope you did, please hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you do want to hit the dislike button, I'd like you to actually say why you didn't like it. That would help me out a lot, because once in a while somebody hits the dislike button and they don't say why. But anyway, I'm sure I deserve it. I probably said something somewhere, somehow, that offended you, and I'm sorry if I did. In any case, yeah, leave a comment down below and book a reading with me. My website is macroastrology.com. My email is macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And all right, guys, I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.